The Himari Emperor's flagship was a nightmare made real. Jake stared at the massive biomechanical monstrosity through the view screen of the small shuttle that carried him and Zaranth toward what might be their deaths. The ship stretched for kilometers in every direction, its living hull pulsing with veins of red light that carried the life essence of countless drained worlds. "It's bigger than I remembered," Zaranth whispered beside him. Through their bond, Jake could feel her terror mixed with grim determination. She had served aboard that ship once, before her exile. The memories of what she had witnessed there would haunt her forever. Behind them, the Liberation Fleet held position at the edge of the star system. 300 ships representing nearly 100 species, all waiting to see if Jake's desperate plan would work. The Emperor had accepted their offer of surrender, eager to examine the first human-Himari hybrid ever created. But Jake knew it was a trap within a trap. The Emperor wanted to understand the bond, so he could create an army of hybrid warriors to complete the conquest of humanity. "Final approach in 30 seconds, the shuttle's biomechanical pilot announced. The creature was one of Zaranth's former crew members who had volunteered for this suicide mission. Through the psychic network, Jake could feel its loyalty and fear. "Jake," Commander Williams' voice came over the communication system from the Discovery. "It's not too late to change your mind. We can find another way." "There is no other way, Tom," Jake replied. "You've seen the tactical projections. Even with all our allied ships, we can't win a direct battle. This is our only chance." The shuttle shuddered as it passed through the Emperor's shields. Jake felt the immense biomechanical systems of the flagship scanning them, probing their minds for deception. But the bond between him and Zaranth created interference that confused the sensors. To the Emperor's instruments, they appeared exactly as they claimed to be, defeated refugees seeking mercy. The docking bay was a cathedral of living flesh and metal. Organic walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins while mechanical systems hummed with deadly efficiency. As Jake and Zaranth disembarked from their shuttle, they were surrounded by Himari, warriors in biomechanical armor that looked grown rather than manufactured. "The Emperor will see you now," one of the guards announced. Jake recognized the language thanks to his bond with Zaranth, but he also noticed something else. These warriors were different from the ones he had encountered before. Stronger, faster, with an aura of barely contained violence that spoke of extensive genetic modification. They were led through corridors that seemed to breathe around them. The walls were lined with transparent tubes filled with swirling energy that Jake realized with horror was pure life essence. Thousands of beings reduced to nothing more than fuel for the Emperor's ambitions. "Try not to look," Zaranth whispered. "It only gets worse the deeper we go." The throne room was a vast chamber at the heart of the ship. The Emperor sat on a throne made of crystallized life essence, his form both magnificent and terrible. He appeared to be pure Himari, but Jake could sense that he had transcended his original biology long ago. He was more machine than flesh now, sustained by technology that had kept him alive for millennia. "So," the Emperor said, his voice echoing through the chamber like the sound of breaking glass, "the exile returns with her pet human." Jake stepped forward, fighting every instinct that told him to run. "I'm Jake Morrison, commander of the human exploration vessel Discovery. I come to offer terms for my species' surrender." The Emperor's laugh was like the screaming of 1,000 dying worlds. "Surrender? Little human, your species will provide far more value as livestock than as allies. But you are something special, the first hybrid. Through you I will learn to create an army of human Himari warriors to serve the Empire." "That's what I'm afraid of," Jake said quietly. Before anyone could react, Jake grabbed Zaranth's hand and triggered the plan they had discussed during their approach. Through their bond, they combined their life forces and reached out to the ship's biomechanical systems. But instead of trying to control them, Jake did something that no Himari had ever attempted before. He offered himself freely to the ship's hunger. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The biomechanical systems, designed to drain life force against the victim's will, were overwhelmed by Jake's voluntary sacrifice. His human physiology, enhanced by his bond with Zaranth, proved incompatible with the ship's feeding mechanisms. Instead of being absorbed, his life force created a feedback loop that began tearing the ship apart from the inside. "What have you done?" the Emperor screamed, rising from his throne as alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. "Something you never understood," Jake replied, feeling his strength beginning to fade. The difference between taking and giving. Through the psychic network, Jake reached out to every member of the Liberation Fleet. But more than that, he reached out to every species that had ever been touched by Himari feeding. Every survivor who carried even the faintest connection to the network they had created. "Now," he whispered across the galaxy. "Everyone. Now." What happened next was beyond anything the Himari Empire had ever faced. Across the galaxy, survivors of their predations began voluntarily offering their life, forced to the psychic network, not to be drained but to be shared. The energy flowed through the network like a river of light, amplified by each willing participant until it became an unstoppable flood. The Emperor's flagship began to tear itself apart as systems designed for consumption tried to process the freely given energy. The crystallized life essence that powered the throne room began to crack and shatter, releasing the souls of countless victims who had been trapped within. "Impossible," the Emperor gasped, his biomechanical form beginning to spark and smoke. "Life force cannot be given freely. It must be taken." "That's where you're wrong," Zaranth said, stepping beside Jake and adding her own strength to the growing network. "Jake showed us something that your empire never learned. True power comes from choice, not force." Through the viewports of the throne room, Jake could see the Emperor's fleet beginning to falter. Ships that had been powered by drained life essence found their systems failing as the psychic feedback reached them. Crews who had never questioned their role as predators suddenly felt the pain of every being they had consumed. But the effort was killing Jake. He could feel his life force being consumed by the feedback loop, his hybrid nature unable to withstand the massive energy flow. Through their bond, he felt Zaranth trying to sustain him, but even her strength wasn't enough. "Jake," she whispered, "I can save you, but I have to sever the connection. If I do, the feedback will stop." Jake shook his head weakly. "No, this is bigger than just us now. The network has to survive." "Then I'll anchor it," Zaranth said, making a decision that Jake felt through their bond before she spoke it aloud. "I'll bind myself permanently to the network. It will keep the connection stable even without you." "Zaranth, no. That will trap you forever. You'll never be free." She smiled at him, her violet eyes blazing with love and determination. "I was never free until I met you. You taught me what it meant to choose. Now I choose to give my freedom so that others can have theirs." The Emperor made one last desperate attempt to stop them, lunging forward with biomechanical claws extended. But Jake and Zaranth were ready. Together they poured the last of their combined strength into the psychic network, creating a pulse that reached every corner of the galaxy. The Emperor's scream was cut short as the feedback overloaded his ancient systems. His biomechanical form crumbled to dust as the ship around them began to collapse. But Jake barely noticed. Through the network, he could feel something miraculous happening. Species that had been enemies for millennia were reaching out to each other. Worlds that had been isolated were making contact. The Himari Empire, built on domination and fear, was dissolving as its subjects discovered they no longer had to submit to survive. "It's working," Jake whispered, as emergency systems began evacuating the dying flagship. "The network is holding. They're all free." Zaranth helped him toward the escape pods, her form already beginning to shimmer as she bound herself more deeply to the psychic network. "Not all of us will survive to see what comes next," she said. "But what we've started will outlive us, both." Jake wanted to argue, wanted to find a way to save her, but he could feel through their bond that her choice was final. She would become the eternal guardian of the network, ensuring that no species would ever again face the horror of the Himari Empire alone. As their escape pod launched from the dying flagship, Jake watched through the viewport as the Emperor's massive ship tore itself apart. Around it, the Imperial fleet was in chaos as ship after ship lost power or turned on their former allies. "Jake Morrison to Liberation Fleet," he said into the pod's communication system. "The Emperor is dead. The flagship is destroyed. All ships begin rescue operations for Himari survivors who want to surrender." "Jake, what about you?" Commander Williams' voice came back immediately. "Are you injured?" Jake looked at Zaranth, who was now barely visible, her form shifting between physical and pure energy as she integrated with the psychic network. Through their bond, he could feel her love and her. Jake followed Zaranth through the twisting corridors of her ship, as the entire structure shuddered under some kind of attack. The red lights that had been dim and dying when he arrived now pulsed with urgent intensity. Through their strange, new connection, he could feel her fear and determination mixing with his own confusion. "How many ships?" Jake asked as they reached what looked like a control room filled with organic computers that resembled giant flowers made of metal and flesh. Zaranth's hands moved across the biomechanical controls with practiced ease. 1,200 vessels, a full execution squad." She looked at him with those violet eyes, and Jake saw something that made his blood run cold. "They're not here to capture me, Jake Morrison. They're here to kill me and anyone who has helped me." The ship rocked again, more violently this time. Through the curved windows of the control room, Jake could see sleek black vessels surrounding them. They looked like predators circling wounded prey. Each ship was smaller than Zaranth's vessel but moved with deadly precision. "Why are they trying to kill you?" Jake demanded. "What did you do?" Zaranth was quiet for a long moment as she worked the controls. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "I refuse to drain a world." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. "What do you mean, drain a world?" "My people, the Himari, we are what you might call vampires. But we don't just drink blood for survival. We drain entire civilizations to power our technology, to extend our lives beyond natural limits. Each of our great ships is powered by the life essence of 1 billion beings." Jake felt sick. The beautiful organic ship around them suddenly felt different, sinister. "How many worlds have you destroyed?" "None," Zaranth said firmly. "That's why they exiled me. That's why they hunt me now. I was their greatest warrior, their most effective drainer, but I refused to complete my final assignment. An entire star system filled with primitive but intelligent life. I couldn't do it." She turned to face him, and Jake could see the pain in her expression. Through their bond, he felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. Guilt, regret, and a desperate hope for redemption. "They gave me a choice," she continued. "Complete the mission or face execution for treason. I chose exile instead. I've been running for 3 of your years, growing weaker without proper sustenance until you found me." Another massive impact shook the ship. Sparks flew from several control panels and the lights flickered ominously. "We need to get back to my ship," Jake said. "My crew can help us fight them." Zaranth shook her head. "Your vessel is no match for even one hunter ship. The Himari have been conquering worlds for thousands of years. Our technology is far beyond anything humanity has developed." "Then what do you suggest?" Jake asked, frustrated. Instead of answering, Zaranth touched a control that brought up a display showing the space around them. Jake's ship, the Discovery, looked tiny compared to the alien vessels. But as he watched, he saw something that filled him with pride. The Discovery was moving toward them, not away. "Your people are brave," Zaranth observed. "But they will die if they interfere." "They're coming because I'm their commander," Jake said. "They won't abandon me." Through the ship's communication system, Jake heard Commander Williams's voice. "Jake, we're reading multiple hostile vessels. Get back here now." Jake grabbed a communication device that Zaranth showed him how to use. "Tom, listen carefully. I'm with a refugee from an alien empire called the Himari. They're vampires who drain entire worlds for power. The ships surrounding us are here to execute her for refusing to commit genocide." "Jake, you're breaking up. Did you say vampires?" "Yes, vampires, real ones. And they're not just after her anymore, they're after me too because she fed from my blood. There's some kind of bond between us now. The communication crackled with interference as another weapon blast hit the ship. Jake, we're coming to get you. No, Tom, stay back. Their weapons are too powerful. But it was too late. Jake watched in horror as the Discovery moved closer to the alien ship. One of the Himari hunters immediately broke off and headed toward the human vessel. The difference in size and technology was immediately apparent as the alien ship's weapons began charging with an ominous red glow. They'll destroy your ship in seconds, Zaranth said quietly. Something snapped inside Jake. These were his people, his friends, and they were going to die because of his decision to help a stranger. But as he looked at Zaranth, he realized she wasn't really a stranger anymore. Through their bond, he could feel her thoughts, her memories, her desperate desire to protect him. Is there anything your ship can do? He asked. The weapons are damaged, the shields are failing, and I'm too weak to pilot effectively even with your blood strengthening me. She paused, studying the tactical display. But there is one thing. What? The bond between us. It's stronger than anything I've ever experienced. Human blood affects my people differently than any other species we've encountered. If I drew more from you, I might be able to enhance my abilities enough to fight them. Jake rolled up his sleeve without hesitation. Do it. Jake, you don't understand. Taking more blood could kill you or change you permanently. I don't know what will happen. My crew is about to die because of my choices, Jake said firmly. Do it. Zaranth took his wrist again, but this time the experience was completely different. As she drank, Jake felt power flowing between them. Not just his life force moving to her, but something flowing back as well. Strength, speed, enhanced senses, and something else. Knowledge. Suddenly, Jake could understand the alien controls around him. He could feel the ship's biomechanical systems as if they were part of his own body. Through Zaranth's memories, he saw flashes of Himari technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. When she finally released him, both of them had changed. Zaranth's silver veins now glowed with brilliant light, and her violet eyes blazed with power. Jake felt stronger than he ever had in his life. His senses were incredibly sharp, and he could feel the ship around him as if it were alive. By the ancient stars, Zaranth whispered. What are you? Before Jake could answer, the ship's weapon systems came online. But now, instead of feeling alien and incomprehensible, Jake understood exactly how they worked. Through their enhanced bond, he and Zaranth worked together to target the Himari ships. The first blast from their ship caught the hunters completely by surprise. The weapon beam, now powered by the unique energy created by their bond, tore through the lead hunter's shields as if they weren't there. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Impossible, came a voice over the Himari communication system. How does the exile have such power? Jake recognized the language now, thanks to the knowledge flowing through his bond with Zaranth. The voice belonged to Hunt Commander Vexitar, her former partner, and the one who had led the mission to exile her. Zaranth activated the communication system. Hello, Vexitar. Miss me? Zaranth, you abomination, what have you done? What is that creature you've bonded with? Through the tactical display, Jake could see the remaining 11 ships repositioning themselves. They were more cautious now, but still deadly. This creature is Jake Morrison of the human species, Zaranth replied. And he's about to show you why the Himari Empire made a terrible mistake in coming here. Jake felt a surge of information through their bond. Battle tactics, weapon configurations, enemy weaknesses. But more than that, he felt Zaranth's absolute faith in him. She had found something in humanity that her own people had lost long ago. Hope. Tom. Jake called over the communication system to his ship. Get back to a safe distance and record everything. What happens here needs to be reported to Earth. Jake, what the hell is going on over there? First contact, Tom, and it's not going the way anyone expected. The remaining Himari ships began their attack in earnest, but Jake and Zaranth were ready. Working together through their bond, they turned the massive bioship into a weapon of incredible power. Each blast they fired was enhanced by the unique energy created by their human-Himari connection. But as they fought, Jake began to understand the true horror of what they were facing. Through Zaranth's memories, he saw world after world drained of life. Billions of beings reduced to nothing more than fuel for Himari technology. And Earth, with its billions of humans whose blood could enhance Himari abilities beyond anything they had ever known, would be the ultimate prize. "Zaranth," he said as they destroyed another hunter ship, "how many worlds has your empire consumed?" "Thousands," she replied, her voice heavy with guilt. "And yours will be next if we don't stop them here." The weight of that revelation hit Jake like a hammer. This wasn't just about saving one alien refugee. This was about the survival of humanity itself. As the last 3 Himari ships regrouped for a final attack, Jake made a decision that would change everything. "We need to get word to Earth. They need to know what's coming." "The hunters will never allow that," Zaranth said. "And even if we escape, the Empire will send a full invasion fleet. Once they learn what human blood can do, nothing will stop them from harvesting your entire species." Jake looked at the tactical display, at his ship in the distance, at the alien predators preparing to finish them off. Through his bond with Zaranth, he could feel her determination, her willing. Jake's desperate plan began to form as he felt the alien ship shudder under another barrage from the 3 remaining Himari hunters. Through his bond with Zaranth, he could sense the biomechanical systems of her vessel, feel them responding to both their combined will. But more importantly, he could feel something else flowing through their connection. Knowledge of Himari physiology, their weaknesses, and the very nature of their vampiric abilities. "The feeding process creates a psychic link," Jake said, his understanding growing stronger by the moment. "That's how you learned English so quickly, how you knew what I needed to hear. You absorbed it from my blood." Zaranth nodded as she maneuvered their ship to avoid another weapons blast. "All Himari can form temporary connections with their prey. It helps us understand them, makes the draining process more efficient. But what happened between us is different, stronger. Because human blood is different," Jake continued, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "You said it yourself. It enhances your abilities beyond normal limits. But if it creates stronger psychic links, then those links work both ways." Through the tactical display, Jake watched as the Discovery pulled back to a safer distance. His crew was smart enough to stay out of the direct fight, but he knew they were recording everything. Whatever happened here, Earth would know about it. "Vexitar," Zaranth called over the communication system to the lead hunter ship. "Still hiding behind your squadron like a coward?" The response came immediately, filled with rage. "You dare insult me, exile? You who consorts with alien filth and perverts the sacred feeding? Sacred?" Zaranth laughed bitterly. "There's nothing sacred about genocide, old friend. You know this as well as I do." Jake could feel her emotions through their bond. Pain, betrayal, and underneath it all, love. Vexitar hadn't just been her commander. He had been something more. "We were bonded once." Vexitar's voice came again, but softer now. "I gave you every chance to complete your final mission. But you chose this path. You chose exile over duty. I chose conscience over blind obedience," Zaranth replied. "Something you never understood." The 3 hunter ships began a coordinated attack pattern that Jake recognized from Zaranth's memories. They would try to disable their ship's weapons, while keeping them alive long enough for a proper execution. The Himari loved their rituals. "Zaranth," Jake said urgently, "if I'm right about the psychic links, then every Himari who has ever fed from human blood would be connected to us in some way. The link might be dormant, but it's still there." Her violet eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. "You want to activate those connections all at once. Use them as a weapon." "Exactly. If human blood enhances your abilities, then it should enhance the psychic feedback as well. We could overload every Himari who has tasted human blood." "Jake, that's impossible. The Empire has been harvesting humans from Earth's colonies for years. There are thousands of Himari who have fed on your people. Creating a psychic pulse that's strong would require enormous amounts of energy. Then we give it what it needs, Jake said, rolling up his sleeve again. You said the bond between us was stronger than anything you'd experienced. Let's find out just how strong it really is. Zaranth shook her head. Jake, if we attempt something like that, it could kill you. The amount of life force required. Will my crew survive if we don't try? No. Will humanity survive when the full Hamari invasion fleet arrives? No. Then we don't have a choice. Before Zaranth could protest further, Jake took her hand and pressed it to his wrist. Do it, but this time don't hold back. Take whatever you need. The ship rocked as another weapons blast hit their shields. Through the tactical display, Jake could see that the Discovery was trying to help by targeting one of the hunter ships, but their weapons were barely scratching the alien vessel's shields. Commander Williams to Jake Morrison, came Tom's voice over the communication system. We're reading massive energy buildups in those ships. I think they're preparing for a final strike. Jake squeezed Zaranth's hand. Now or never. She bit down on his wrist, but this time the experience was unlike anything before. Jake felt his life force flowing into her, but instead of weakening him, it seemed to strengthen both of them. The biomechanical systems of the ship responded to their combined will, drawing power from their bond and amplifying it through the vessel's organic components. Through their connection, Jake began to feel something extraordinary. Other minds, distant and faint, but definitely there. Himari who had fed on human blood across the galaxy, each one carrying a dormant psychic, linked to humanity. The network was vast, spanning star systems and involving thousands of individuals. I can feel them, Jake whispered. All of them. As can I, Zaranth replied, her voice filled with amazement. Jake, this is beyond anything in Hamari history. Your species, the psychic resonance is incredible. The ship's biomechanical systems began to glow with an intense light as Jake and Zaranth poured their combined energy into the psychic network. Through their bond, they reached out across space, touching every dormant connection between Hamari and human. On the hunter ship surrounding them, Jake could sense confusion and growing alarm. Vexitar's voice came over the communication system, but now it carried a note of fear. What are you doing, Zaranth? I can feel something, some kind of interference. Justice, she replied simply. The psychic pulse erupted from their ship like a wave of invisible fire. Jake felt it race across space, following the network of dormant connections, reaching every Hamari who had ever tasted human blood. The feedback was immediate and devastating. On the 3 hunter ships, Jake could sense the crews writhing in agony as the psychic overload hit them. Through Zaranth's enhanced perceptions, he could feel their confusion and terror as their own feeding abilities turned against them. One of the hunter ships immediately lost power, drifting helplessly, as its crew struggled to deal with the psychic assault. The second ship's weapon systems went offline as its operators collapsed at their stations. But Vextar's ship, the command vessel, was different. Jake could sense that its commander was fighting the psychic feedback with impressive mental discipline. Impossible. Vextar's voice came over the communication system, strained but still functional. How can an inferior species create such power? We're not inferior, Jake said, taking control of the communication system through his bond with the ship. We're just different, and that difference is going to save us all. Through the psychic network, Jake could sense something else. Fear, spreading through the Hamari Empire as the pulse reached more and more of their kind. Panic in the great feeding ships as their crews collapsed. Confusion in the Imperial Palace as nobles who had gorged themselves on human blood found themselves overwhelmed by psychic feedback. But the effort was taking its toll. Jake could feel his strength ebbing away, his life force being consumed by the massive psychic pulse. Through their bond, he sensed Zaranth's desperation as she tried to sustain both of them. Jake, you're dying, she said, her voice breaking. I have to stop the pulse. No, he whispered. Not yet. I can feel something else in the network. Other species, victims of the Hamari who still carry traces of the connection. If we can reach them. Through supreme effort, Jake pushed the psychic pulse further, beyond just the Himari human connections. He reached out to every species that had ever been. Drained by the Empire, every world that had been consumed. The network expanded exponentially as dormant psychic links across the galaxy suddenly blazed to life. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Himari Empire. Through their vampiric feeding, they had connected themselves to every species they had ever consumed. Now those connections became weapons as the psychic feedback grew stronger and stronger. Vextar's ship finally succumbed, its crew overwhelmed by the massive psychic assault. But as Jake watched it drift powerlessly in space, he realized that his own strength was almost gone. The effort of maintaining such a massive psychic network was killing him. "Zaranth," he gasped. "I can't hold it much longer." Through their bond, he felt her making a desperate decision. Instead of trying to save her own energy, she poured everything she had into sustaining him. Her life force flowed into his, keeping him alive as the psychic pulse reached its maximum intensity. "I won't let you die," she said fiercely. "Not after you've given us all hope." But Jake could sense that her sacrifice wouldn't be enough. The psychic network was too vast, the energy requirements too great. They had succeeded in crippling the Himari Empire, but it would cost both their lives. Then through the network, Jake felt something unexpected. Other minds reaching back to him. Not Himari, but the survivors of the species they had consumed. Beings from across the galaxy who had felt the psychic pulse and understood what it meant. They began adding their own energy to the network, feeding power back to Jake and Zaranth. Hundreds of species, thousands of survivors, all contributing to the psychic pulse that was bringing down their ancient enemy. The discovery moved closer, and Jake heard Commander Williams' voice over the communication system. "Jake, we're reading some kind of massive energy wave spreading across the galaxy. What did you do?" Jake smiled weakly as he felt the network stabilizing, sustained now. 3 weeks had passed since the psychic pulse that crippled the Himari Empire, and Jake Morrison was no longer entirely human. The changes had started slowly at first, but now they were impossible to ignore. His strength had increased dramatically. His reflexes were faster than any humans should be, and his senses were so sharp that he could hear conversations from 3 decks away on the Discovery. But the most disturbing change was the hunger. Jake stood in his quarters aboard the biomechanical ship that had become their mobile base, staring at his reflection in a mirror made of some kind of living metal. His eyes, once brown, now held flecks of violet that grew brighter each day. The silver veins that marked Zaranth's skin were beginning to appear faintly beneath his own. "You're fighting it again," Zaranth said from behind him. Through their bond, she could feel his internal struggle as clearly as her own thoughts. "I can smell their blood," Jake said quietly. "Every human on my ship. I know exactly where each one is, what they're feeling, how fast their hearts are beating, and part of me wants to—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. Zaranth understood. The bond that had saved them both was transforming Jake into something like her, part human, part Himari, caught between 2 natures. "It will pass," she said, moving to stand beside him. "The hunger becomes manageable with time." "Does it? Or do you just get better at controlling it?" Before she could answer, the communication system activated. Commander Williams' voice filled the room with barely contained excitement. "Jake, you need to see this. We've got incoming ships, but they're not Himari. They're sending peaceful signals, in dozens of different languages." Jake and Zaranth made their way to the bridge where the main view screen showed a sight that took Jake's breath away. Ships of every conceivable design were arriving in the system. Some were sleek and metallic, others appeared to be grown rather than built, and a few looked like they were made of crystallized light. "Representatives from 47 different species," Lieutenant Chen reported. "All survivors of Himari feeding operations. They're calling this the Liberation Fleet." Through the psychic network that still connected them to beings across the galaxy, Jake could feel the hope and determination of the assembled crews. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together, united by their shared hatred of the Himari Empire. "They want to meet with you," Commander Williams said. "Both of you." Apparently, word has spread about what happened here. Jake felt a surge of pride mixed with anxiety. The psychic pulse had done more than just cripple the Himari Empire. It had created something new, a network of communication and cooperation that spanned the galaxy. But with that came responsibility he wasn't sure he was ready for. The first delegation arrived within hours. Jake found himself face to face with beings he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. There was Commander Thexani of the Crystalline Hegemony, whose body appeared to be made of living diamond. Captain Morden of the Iron Clans looked like a walking suit of medieval armor, but Jake could sense the warm intelligence behind his glowing red eyes. Most surprising was Ambassador Veltar of the Seed Worlds, a plant-like being who communicated through chemical emissions that the ship's biosystems translated into speech. "The network you created," Ambassador Veltar said, her words carrying the scent of spring flowers. "It has awakened something that has been dormant for centuries: hope." "The Himari had convinced us that resistance was futile," Captain Morden added, his metallic voice ringing like a bell. "They made us believe that we were alone, that survival meant submission. But your psychic pulse showed us the truth. We are many, and they are few." Jake felt overwhelmed by their expectations. These beings were looking to him and Zaranth for leadership in a war that could determine the fate of the galaxy. But he was just a human explorer who had made one desperate choice to save a dying alien. "I don't know if I'm the right person to lead this alliance," Jake said honestly. 3 weeks ago, I didn't even know aliens existed." Commander Thexani's crystalline form chimed with what Jake's enhanced hearing recognized as laughter. "Leadership is not about experience, human Jake. It is about making the right choice when everything depends on it. You chose to save one enemy of your people's destroyers. That choice saved us all." Over the following days, more ships arrived. The Liberation Fleet grew to over 300 vessels representing nearly 100 different species. Each brought their own technology, their own weapons, and their own reasons for wanting to see the Himari Empire fall. But they also brought disturbing news. "The Emperor himself is coming," reported Captain Zelfox of the Void Swimmers, a aquatic species whose ship was filled with a breathable liquid instead of air. "Our scouts have detected massive fleet movements in the core worlds. They're gathering every ship they have." Through her bond with Jake, Zaranth shared her knowledge of the Himari Emperor. Ancient beyond measure, he was the one who had originally transformed the Himari from a single-world species into a galactic empire of predators. His personal flagship was a biomechanical monstrosity the size of a small moon, powered by the life essence of entire star systems. "How long before he arrives?" Jake asked. 2 weeks, maybe less," Captain Zelfox replied. "He's bringing the entire Imperial fleet with him. Over 5,000 ships, including the Great Devourers." The Great Devourers were the Himari's planet killer. Ships, massive vessels capable of draining the life from entire worlds in a matter of hours. Jake had seen their work through Zaranth's memories, and the images still haunted his dreams. "We can't face that kind of firepower," Commander Williams said during a private strategy session. "Our entire fleet barely numbers 400 ships, and most of them are smaller vessels designed for rescue operations, not warfare." Jake studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Himari forces. The numbers were overwhelming, but he had learned not to trust numbers alone. The psychic network had taught him that sometimes the most powerful weapons were the ones your enemy never saw coming. "Zaranth," he said. "The Emperor. Has he ever fed on human blood?" She shook her head. "The Emperor doesn't feed directly. He sustains himself through the biomechanical systems of his ship, which are powered by the essence drained from conquered worlds." "So he's not connected to our psychic network?" "No. Neither are most of the Imperial fleet's crews. Only the Yao, hunter ships, and advanced scouts have had direct contact with human colonies." Jake felt the hunger rising again, stronger than before. But this time, he didn't fight it. Instead, he let it guide his thoughts. Let the Himari instincts that were growing stronger within him suggest possibilities he would never have considered as a pure human. "What if we could change that?" he said slowly. Zaranth's violet eyes widened as she understood what he was suggesting. Jake, no, what you're thinking is too dangerous. What's he thinking? Commander Williams demanded. Jake turned to face the assembled representatives of the Liberation Fleet. The Emperor's ship is powered by drained life essence. But what if instead of draining that essence, we could reverse the flow? Feed our own energy into his systems? That's impossible, Captain Morden said. The biomechanical systems are designed to consume, not give. Unless you had someone who understood both systems intimately, Jake replied. Someone who was connected to both human and Himari physiology. Through their bond, Jake felt Zaranth's fear and admiration in equal measure. She understood exactly what he was proposing. It would require him to get aboard the Emperor's ship, to connect directly to its biomechanical systems, and to use his unique hybrid nature to reverse the flow of energy. It would kill you, she said simply. Maybe. But it would also destroy the Emperor and his flagship. Without him, the Imperial fleet would fall apart, the Empire would collapse. There has to be another way, Commander Williams protested. Jake, you can't sacrifice yourself for this. But Jake could feel the hunger growing stronger, could sense his human nature being slowly consumed by the Himari characteristics that Zaranth's blood had awakened in him. Soon he might not be able to control it. He might become the very thing they were fighting against. Tom, look at me, Jake said, letting his friend see the violet flecks in his eyes, the silver veins starting to show through his skin. I'm changing into something that isn't entirely human anymore. If we don't end this soon, I might become a threat to everyone I care about. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Through the psychic network, Jake could feel the mixed emotions of the assembled fleet commanders. Fear, hope, determination, and underneath it all, a growing respect for his willingness to sacrifice himself for beings he had only just met. There's one problem with your plan, Zaranth said quietly. Getting aboard the Emperor's ship. His flagship is surrounded by the most powerful shields in the galaxy. Nothing can penetrate them while they're active. Jake smiled, feeling more like himself than he had in days. Then we'll just have to get him to lower them for us. How? By giving him something he wants more than anything else in the galaxy. Jake looked around the room at the assembled representatives of species from across the galaxy. Beings who had suffered under Himari rule for centuries, who had lost entire worlds to their hunger. Commander Jake Morrison stared at the massive view screen as his ship, the UES Discovery, drifted through the silent void of deep space. 3 years had passed since humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel, and Jake commanded the most advanced exploration vessel Earth had ever built. His crew of 42 specialists represented the best and brightest humanity could offer to the stars. The bridge hummed with quiet activity as sensors swept the surrounding space. They were 12 light-years from Earth, farther than any human had ever traveled. The mission parameters were simple: explore, document, and establish contact protocols, should they encounter alien life. What Jake never expected was to find that life dying in the darkness. Lieutenant Sarah Chen turned from her console, her dark eyes wide with excitement. Commander, we're detecting a massive object bearing 27 Mark IV. It appears to be artificial. Jake leaned forward in his captain's chair. On the main screen, a ship materialized from the cosmic dust and debris. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Discovery. The vessel's design was unlike anything in human engineering. Organic curves blended with metallic surfaces, creating something that looked grown rather than built. Sections of the hull pulsed with a faint red light, like a heartbeat. Any signs of life? Jake asked. Chen's fingers danced across her controls. Minimal energy readings, whatever it is, it's running on emergency power at best. But Commander, I am detecting a single life sign. Very faint, but definitely there. The bridge fell silent. This was, at first contact, the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Jake felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. Every decision from this point forward would be studied and analyzed for generations. Open a channel, all frequencies, Jake ordered. The communications officer, Lieutenant Torres, shook his head after several minutes of attempts. No response, Sir, the ship appears to be completely silent. Jake studied the alien vessel. Something about it troubled him. The way the red lights pulsed seemed desperate, like a dying animal's last gasps. The hull showed signs of battle damage, with several sections completely dark. "Commander," Chen called out. "The life sign is getting weaker. Whatever's over there is dying." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Their first contact with alien life, and they were about to watch it die. He thought of all the protocols, all the careful procedures Earth scientists had developed for this moment. None of them covered what to do when you found someone dying alone in space. "Prepare the shuttle," Jake said suddenly. His first officer, Commander Williams, stood up from his station. "Sir, regulations clearly state that first contact situations require a full diplomatic team and extensive safety protocols. We should contact Earth for instructions. That will take 6 hours for the signal to reach them and 6 more for a response," Jake replied. "This being will be dead by then." Williams stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Jake, we don't know anything about them. They could be hostile. That ship could be a trap." Jake looked at his old friend. They had served together for over a decade, through 3 wars and countless dangerous missions. Williams had saved his life more times than either man could count. But this was different. "Tom, look at that ship. Does it look hostile to you? It's barely holding together. There's one life sign and it's failing. This isn't a trap, it's a rescue mission." The debate continued for several more minutes, but Jake's mind was made up. Against all regulations and the protests of his senior staff, he suited up for an EVA mission. The shuttle would take too long to prep and required a larger crew. This was something he needed to do alone and quickly. 20 minutes later, Jake floated through the vacuum of space, his magnetic boots clanking against the alien hull. Up close, the ship was even more impressive. The metal felt warm even through his gloves, and he could swear he felt vibrations, like a pulse. Following his scanner's readings, he made his way to what appeared to be an airlock. The entrance dilated open at his approach, revealing an interior filled with soft red light. Jake hesitated for a moment at the threshold. Once he crossed, there would be no going back. Humanity's first steps into an alien world would be his responsibility alone. The atmosphere inside registered as breathable, though with an unusual chemical composition his suit couldn't identify. Jake kept his helmet on as he moved through corridors that seemed to curve and flow like arteries. The walls pulsed with that same rhythmic light, and now he was certain it was a heartbeat. The ship itself was alive. He found her in what could only be described as a medical bay, though unlike any human design. She lay on a bioorganic bed that seemed to cradle her form, connected to various tubes and monitoring devices that pulsed with dying light. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was beautiful in an alien way that his mind struggled to process. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with delicate patterns of silver veins visible beneath. Her hair was long and white, spread across the bed like spun starlight. She appeared humanoid, but clearly wasn't human. Her features were too perfect, too refined, like an artist's idealized sculpture. But it was her condition that made Jake's heart race. She was dying. The monitors around her bed flickered weakly, and her breathing was so shallow it was barely visible. Dark circles surrounded her closed eyes, and her lips had taken on a blue tinge. As if sensing his presence, her eyes fluttered open. They were violet, deep and endless like twin galaxies. When they focused on Jake, he saw intelligence there, and something else. Desperate hunger. She tried to speak, but only a whisper emerged. Jake leaned closer, pulling off his helmet despite every safety protocol screaming at him not to. "Please," she whispered in perfect English, though how she knew his language was impossible. "I'm dying." Jake knelt beside the bed. "I want to help you. Tell me what you need." Her violet eyes locked onto his. "Blood," she said simply. "I need blood to live." The words should have terrified him, should have sent him running back to his ship. Instead, Jake found himself rolling up his sleeve. Something about her desperation, The way she looked at him not as prey but as salvation made the decision for him. "Will mine work?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "Human blood? I can smell it in you. It's different from the others. Stronger." Jake used his suit's medical kit to make a small incision on his wrist. The alien woman's eyes widened as she saw his blood, red and rich with life. She struggled to sit up, and Jake helped support her. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zaranth," she breathed. "Yours?" "Jake Morrison." She smiled then, the first real emotion he had seen from her. "Jake Morrison. I will remember that name." What happened next defied everything Jake thought he knew about biology or physics. Zaranth took his wrist gently in her hands and bit down. Her teeth were sharp, but the bite was surprisingly painless. As she drank, Jake felt a strange warmth spread through his body. The change in her was immediate and dramatic. Color returned to her pale skin, the silver veins beneath began to glow more brightly, and her violet eyes blazed with renewed life. But Jake felt something else happening, a connection forming between them, like a bridge being built in his mind. Suddenly he could sense her thoughts, her emotions. Relief flooded through both of them, but beneath it was something deeper. Gratitude, yes, but also a fierce protective instinct that wasn't entirely his own. Zaranth released his wrist, and Jake saw that the wound had already healed. She stood up from the bed, moving with fluid grace that spoke of incredible strength. But she never let go of his hand. "Jake Morrison," she said, her voice now strong and clear. "You have given me life when I had none. By the ancient laws of my people, I am bound to you now. I swear by blood and stars that I will never leave your side again." Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the alien ship. Red lights flashed urgently, and he heard the distinct sound of multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace nearby. Zaranth's expression turned grim. "They've found me," she said. "We need to leave. Now." "Who?" Jake asked, but he was already moving, following her through the corridors as the ship shook around them. "My people," Zaranth replied, "and they're not here to rescue me. They're here to finish what they started."